So hi everyone. So here I'm Matheus and I'm presenting here another paper. The paper that I chose for this week was the AI scientist towards fully automated open-ended scientific discovery by sakana.ai and people from University of British Columbia and University of Oxford. And this paper, I think it was caused a bit of a buzz, right? Because it was like at least the first one that at least claimed that perform like fully automated paper writing. So the LLM would had like idea, would do the coding to assess the idea, would check results, and then would write a paper on that. Yeah, it was launched. It was released like last year. So I will explain this, the first version. Then also uh, they released a second version that apparently had like a first peer-reviewed publication that was accepted, then withdraw because ethics concerns. But anyway, so I'll present like the first version of the paper, and yeah, let's start. So here at the start, they mention here that like these frontier models, these LLMs, they already aid human scientists for brainstorming ideas, writing code, prediction tests. I think that's everyone uses on that, right? But then they say like we introduced the AI scientist, and I think it's a maybe it's a gripe for mine, but I find it very funny because every time they mention AI scientist, they put like a different font, like it's a mark of the paper, and it's kind of like a marketing, right? Sakana.ai is a company for it's focused on AI, so maybe they try to do some marketing. But anyway, I think it's very fun, like the AI scientist. It's like, but anyway, they introduced the AI scientists here, which generate ideas, propose code, write code, and they even write the LaTeX to do like the final paper. And then like this framework that they run using different LLMs, they did a test on that as well. And they mention here that this method can generate a full paper at like less than $15, which is very cheap, right? uh, Surprisingly cheap, I think. And then they mention here that this approach could like mean like the beginning of a new era of scientific discovery, right? Because it's very fully automated, right? It's not like from scratch. You need to give like some context or some seed idea. But anyway, I think it's very impressive, the results. Uh, and then we start the paper with like basic introduction from the scientific method, and then they mention like, oh, the human researcher collects background data, form hypotheses, and then assess these hypotheses if they are true or not, and then publish its findings, right? And then it goes to peer review, so it's accepted or not to be published. Uh, and then they mention here like how like we could try to do like some automating some aspects of it, doing some tools, but these approaches remain constrained by rigorous defined search spaces and objectives, right? So it's like the current approaches are very narrow focus, and this one they mention they want to try something that's more like open, right? You give an idea and the LLM does the rest. So here again, they mentioned like we introduced the AI scientist here, uh, and then given, like I said, a broad research direction, so it's not too narrow, and some initial code base. The AI scientist simulates performs ideation, literature research, experiment planning, experiment iterations, manuscript writing, and peer reviewing to produce an insightful paper. Again, he they mentioned the financial cost at around $15 per paper. And also they mention here like they leverage like LLM frameworks, like some prompting, right? Chain of thoughts, self-reflection. And then they also mention here coding assistant aider to help with the coding of said experiments. And here they said that like crucially the paper and experimental artifacts the AI scientist produces allows to easily interpret the results, right? Because it generates files, right? So someone can review later and say like, oh, this code makes sense or not. But of course you need like someone to review it. But anyway, so the contributions that the paper here mentions is they introduced the first end-to-end framework for automated scientific discovery machine learning enabled by LLMs. They assess the quality of the generated papers. So they introduced a foundation model reviewing process. So like a peer review, but with LLMs, which I think is very interesting, right? It's something that, yeah, I think it's very interesting, right? Because it's a work that no one receives money to doing that. So maybe we could automate it. Maybe we would introduce some biases. But anyway, I will explain more later. And here again, the AI scientists can generate hundreds of interesting media quality papers over the course of a week. And they perform here a case study on one paper here. And I think that's it. So here I have like this image here that will explain a bit how it works. I will go back here later. Let me just continue a bit of the paper, right? So on background here, they do a very quick introduction to large language models. And I think here I highlighted things that really make sense in this context of the AI scientist, like someone that writes a paper on a topic like machine learning, right? Because they mention here, LLMs do not only generate coherent text, but crucially also exhibit human-like abilities, like common sense, reasoning, and ability to write code, right? And I think like if you think on a paper on machine learning, like you need to code to have your idea, you need like common sense abilities, right? To see like, oh, this idea makes sense or not. And generate text, right? I think LLMs are, I mean, everyone knows that, right? And like, and we could transform this to a paper, right? The text of a paper. They mentioned very briefly agent frameworks, right? How you could specify like some functions that LLM can try to do, basic. And they mention here as well Aider, that is the LLM-based coding assistant here that they used to help writing the code for the experiments, also for to measure the experiments. And I think maybe the LaTeX as well, they use Aider. Anyway, so okay, so let me go back here to the image, I think. Then I explain here on my other paper here about the steps that the AI scientist does. So it has three main phases: idea generation, experiment iteration, and paper write-up. So like I mentioned here, and I think I'll go, on the repo here, they have like the code here. I'll go very briefly here to explain a bit the example. But at the start, we have like, we provide the LLM with like a code template and some seed idea. So like you have like some seed and then some context and then the code that is marginally related to this seed content, right? So we start with the idea generation. So first, like you give like this template, and the AI scientists will brainstorm ideas. So we generate some ideas that what problems could be tackled with this starting point, right? And they take here inspiration for open-endedness, right? So you don't we give like a seed, but don't say like you have to follow the seed in this way or that way. And then like they prompt the LLM to write ideas, and but also from that idea also explain the experiment that could be made from that idea. And then like they also do some auto assessments and scores on interestingness, novelty, and feasibility, right? The LLM does the auto score, so it's not that maybe it's not that uh, reliable, but anyway, so the idea, like you have like the idea, how would you experiment with that idea, and then some scores. And this process is iterative. So maybe you generate a first batch of ideas, and then you go again and try to refine these ideas, maybe improve these ideas, maybe an idea that is more interesting, or maybe you have an idea that's very good, but it's not feasible. So like, how can we reduce the scope to make that idea more feasible, right? Okay. So this is an iterative process, and then we try to refine and select the best ideas. Then we go to the next step, which is the novelty check, where they used the API from Semantic Scholar, which is very similar to Google Scholar. So basically, it's kind of like a literature review, kind of, right? So like do some searches, of course, maybe it's a bit limited. And I think one point that this paper could use is like what was released like later in the year 2024, like deep research, right? Frameworks that are very good, right? They put LLM to use the internet. But again, they use the Semantic Scholar. And then we'd find like some papers. And then with this part here, they use the Semantic Scholar as a filter. So like maybe one idea is very good, but it was already made. So no. So they use this as a filter. So they try to find an idea that is good, but also it um, is good, but also they couldn't find anything that's too similar. So can they go for the idea scoring to find the experiment? So here is the experiment iteration, right? So here they use either to plan the experiments and then run and execute the code. So one thing that they do here they put like, oh, you do write this code to do this and that, etc. Here they do again interactively do the code. And one point that they do that's kind of like a limitation because like they put either to run the code and they have like 4 attempts if a bug arises, right? Because sometimes the bug there's some issue and they have to fix the code. And I think they do this because sometimes when you try to again and again with LLM, I think we did an experiment on that. Like the LLM only gets worse, and then sometimes it's better to start again from the beginning than try to iterate from a shitty code that we had, right? Okay, so after the experiments, again we give either the results and try to take notes and do like create the images for the experiments, right? Because you know, like you do like a machine learning algorithm, and then you have the error rate, and then you have to plot that to make into a paper, right? So they also use either to do like this data analysis part of a paper. Finally, they get to the part of paper write-up. So we have to write the manuscript in LaTeX. Again, we give a template, very simple template, and then like it's kind of the LLM has to fill the template and say like, oh, introduction is this, related work is this, results, experiments, conclusion and future work, etc. Kind of simple. Yeah, and it's either that does it's either that does the LaTeX. Okay, I think. Let's see here. What else? Another thing that I think is not here, but they also do, and I think it's pretty obvious. They also do again the Semantic Scholar API to find references, right? Which is kind of, I think maybe it is a bit like out of order, right? I think maybe in a traditional sense we would do interactive, like find the resources and then adding to our research and not adding them at the end, which I don't know, like if it didn't help you, like it's just to give some introduction, right? It wouldn't help, like the reference would not help in the experiment part, right? But anyway. And then they do like some refinement, like reflection, because I think everyone that uses LLM to do some writing knows that LLMs can get kind of verbose, so like try to reduce redundancy, etc., etc., etc. And I think that's it, like how the AI scientist works, okay? So let me continue here. So the other part that they did that I think is very interesting is the automated paper reviewing, which basically is like try to do peer review using LLMs. So they design here an agent to conduct these reviews following some guidelines from some conference. So here, like the new RIPS, they could also use other conferences as well. So here they have like some results, and the results, they are pretty aligned with a human. What they do is a bit different in some parts, but they talk together, right? They are very similar. Oh, and this I forgot to mention. They use a data set of past here, the ICLR 2022 paper data set. So you have like all the papers and their review results, if they were accepted or rejected, or if they like were weak accept or weak reject, etc. So they have a data set to fit, like they mention here, like a calibrate the agent, right? And here they do some things, but then they mention here, like overall, the metrics, the results suggest that LLM-based reviews can not only provide valuable feedback, but also align more closely with the average human score. Then human reviewers align with each other, which is also a point that they also mention here, that they also did some ablation tests in, like, not only using one agent, but using several agents to review the same paper. And they see that the results don't vary a lot, but they reduce variance as expected, right? And again, each review generated like costs like less than $1 in API costs. So it's very cost effective. And here, like they mention here, like, oh, some models, they are more optimistic than others, so have to correct that. But okay. Now I think we got to the case study here. I think this is a very interesting part. So they have here is the adaptive dual scale denoising. So I'll go here to the repo. So let me just get here. So I able to here. So basically here on the repo, they have like some templates. So I will show a bit how it started and how it ended, right? So here, like, is an example of what we had here. So you have like some data sets, and then you have like some experiment.py. You had like some code here, then trains like a PyTorch model, and then you have like this sinusoidal embedding, the MLP denoising, etc. Something I won't explain this because I don't know, but and also I don't think it makes sense for this presentation as well. But anyway, so have some starting code, and then you have like some seed ideas, like say, oh, adaptive learning is rate schedule, blah 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 blah, and then you have like some ideas of wow, interesting, feasibility, novelty, etc. And as well, I think I have the prompt, right? They're like very simple prompt, right? Oh, your ambitious system prompt, blah 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 blah, and then you get we can use this to start, and also the LaTeX. So, like I mentioned, the LaTeX is very simple, but as you can see here, it has like some citations, and then here, abstract, introduction, related work, background, method, experimental setup, results, conclusion, future work. And I forgot to mention here, but these papers from the first version of AI Scientist, they are available. So it's like here as well on the blog post here. This one is the one that they're going to mention on paper. So you can see here like abstract, introduction, background, like it follow exactly the same results. And then here you can see that this was the paper that was generated. So you can see that has interesting pictures, seems very explained, is very well formatted in LaTeX. And yeah, a bit verbose maybe, but anyway, you have like results, table, ablation tests. It's very complete. Yeah, but yeah, okay. So let me go back here. So here on the aiscientist, oh, not this folder. Let me just show here like the example papers they had here, adaptive denoising. So here, when you go here into the ideas JSON, we'll be able to see that one idea that was generated for the paper here is on this JSON, right? It's, if you search, you'll find that. So basically, they had this problem, and then they select a paper that was like 6 direction of the algorithm, the idea, and then it generates a paper from this idea. So let me just to show. Let me just. Don't think it's necessary, but anyway. Okay, so you can see like here is the idea that was used to generate the paper. And then you can see like you generated lots of codes. Oh, no, not this one, this folder. It generated like code. It changed a bit of the code, but then here the LaTeX is the LaTeX that's on the paper. So you can see that you have like a very small, like that starting code and ideas, and was able to find an interesting idea and then write everything else. So here they mention here the idea that was generated, right? And then the scores, and if it's novel or not, pass like the semantic scholar filter. So have the experiments. So they mention here the code that was generated on Aider. And they mention like some ideas, and then here they mention like a Git diff file, and then you mention like, oh, the MPU denoiser, they added other parts to do the experiments, they remove other parts, etc., etc., etc. So you can see that you is use the starting code to build like the experiment from that. The aiscientist generate a 11-page manuscript, which is this one, right? Like I mentioned. And they have like some points that they highlight that were very impressive with the results. First, they think that it was very precise mathematical description of the algorithm, so it was able to explain well what the algorithm was doing, right? It was not like hallucinating and creating like things out of scratch. It did a comprehensive right type of experiments, so it was able to, what's this? So it was able to carry on the experiments and also explain like what they're doing. It achieved some good empirical results, right? They don't improve too much, but it was interesting nonetheless. They mention here that for them, they came up with some good algorithm-specific plots, which I think is interesting because, like they will mention later, these LLMs that they use, they don't have vision. So it was using code, right? They have reference of good code, what good code is, and it was able to think, oh, maybe this plot will be interesting, right? And they also think the future work was very good. But it has like some issues with the paper. So it had like some subtle errors, like here they mentioned like something that the LLM explained, but did the other way, so it doesn't make sense. It did hallucinate on some experimental details. So they mention here like they use like some specific GPUs, but they run probably this on cloud, right? So we don't know exactly what is the GPUs that are running, if that is even something that uh, would have value, right? Adding this, right? And also did guess it like PyTorch version, so it doesn't make, you don't need that, right? It tended to have like a positive interpretation of results. So even when like the results are negative, you try to spin out as positives or negatives. So here they mention like a metric that lower is better, and then they mention like, oh, it's even though our experiment is higher, this metric which is worse, they say, oh, it's improved on that. So it's like the algorithm correctly and improves the error rate by 5%, like I'm saying that likes it positive, right? And I think here interesting parts here is that I think again, like people that work with LLMs know this a lot, right? The paper contains results for every single experiment, so it doesn't have that common sense of stating like what is important or not, right? It just throws everything for you. So maybe it's a thing that even with reflection, it was not able to properly filter. Like maybe we don't need intermediate results, right, for a paper. And I think that I think is very, like I mentioned here, a criticism is minimal references, right? Because they get like some 20 API calls from Semantic Scholar to build the references, but we always see like papers. I think all the papers on Paperclub that we present recently, they have lots and lots and lots of references. And I don't think this is like a very big issue, but it's kind of weird, right? To have like, oh, paper that's written like out of nowhere, and then you get to references and it's like this, which is like 9 references, 11 references. Not a issue, but I think it's more like a do with the limitations of relying on an API to do that. Okay, and then we get to the part of the review. So the automated review, it was able to find like some concerns of the generated script. They mentioned like some parts of the data sets were very simple, and then they mentioned, oh, the AI scientists cannot download higher dimensional data, so maybe this issue is not too bad. But anyway, so it was able to write here. I think it's on the repo as well. If you guys are interested, here have the notes txt. Is this one? Oh, it's review txt. Okay. Anyway, it's not that important. It was able like to review the paper, say, oh, there's these points, there's some weaknesses, there's some questions about the paper. I think the funny part here in the end is that the LLM rejected this paper, right? So it was very interesting, but yeah, the LLM would not accept in this conference, which I think is fair point. Uh, uh, So have like some final comments here from the authors. They mention here like how they were impressed and how it was able to iteratively adjust its code for refining like some parameters, right? So using Ada, right, to say like, oh, this is not good, so try to refine this, and then again and again and again, and it was able to refine and get good results. And then here, like they also mention about some limitations of this specific paper. And here they go more about, it was kind of a bit of their area of expertise, the authors, not the LLM. And they say, oh, there's some issues here, but it's still interesting. And then they go here. Interestingly, the true shortcomings of this paper described above, which here like some of the shortcomings of the paper, require certain level of domain knowledge to identify, and were only captured by the automated, and they were not, oh my god, were only partially captured by the automated reviewer, right? So the LLM reviewer, it rejected the paper, but it was not able to grasp all the shortcomings of the paper, which like a true human that is an expert in the field was able to, which is a point that I think is interesting. And maybe with as technology advances, like with some prompting, we could get to that part, right? So yeah, at the current capabilities of the AI scientists, this can be resolved by human feedback. And then here they say, overall, we judge the performance of the AI scientist to be about a level of an early stage ML researcher. So it is able to execute ideas, but maybe lack like some deeper knowledge to understand like, oh, if this is good or bad. And I think as we get like to other experiments, we'll see that sometimes the AI scientist is not able to complete the LaTeX or the code, right? So lots of ideas, we don't have a final paper, right? I don't know if that would also be very similar to early stage ML researcher, but there's that. They did like some experiments about different LLM models. Like I said, this paper is from last year, so you can see here like it's not Claude 4, etc. But basically, they compare different LLMs and try to run the algorithm here. Here, they note here that automated novelty check is made by the LLM. So maybe if LLM is too critic, is with like generate fewer ideas to be applied, and likewise the opposite as well. Like you have like lots of shit ideas that maybe the LLM will think is very good. Yeah, but again, the results which are outdated, right? The Claude had like the best quality of the papers, with GPT coming second. Again, 10 to 15 cost per paper. But I think a point interesting here is that like paper models like the GPT-4 struggle with writing LaTeX, or others struggle with writing code, right? So they mention here 10 to 15 per paper, but sometimes the process doesn't finish, right? Because like, oh, I wasn't able to do the code like I had like the maximum retries, so either did like unfinished version of the code, so we don't have a final experiment, or we maybe we have, but we don't have the final paper, right? So I think it's a point that it's not highlighted enough on the paper, but yeah. And again, I don't think this is like a big issue, right? Like I think the most interesting part when people think the AI scientist is someone that is able to do something out of nowhere, and not like, oh, it's not able to do right LaTeX. I think it's a human doing that is fine, right? Anyway, they go here about other papers. Here also they have like the automated score for each model. So here you can see that Sonnet, it has like the higher scores here, but they are not like, and Llama performs the worst. But anyway, it's just that. And also here, I forgot here, this one is interesting as well, because they have like the ideas generated, the ideas that were considered novel, and the ones that were able to do the experiments, the ones that completed a paper. So you can see that has Sonnet was able to complete 38 papers out of 51, but then GPT-4 was able to complete only 16 papers out of 51. So the ratio is very bad. But again, it's only the LaTeX part. But again, the experiments also not very good. So there's that. Okay, so let me put here. I don't think we need to explain this more. So we're going to related work, but just to add like some points here, I think they mentioned here LLM for machine learning research. They mention like some works here that propose benchmark for measuring how successful LLMs can write code. I think this is very important. They also has one that finds LLMs that can consistently produce higher quality ideas, which is again is very related to this work. And finally, one that automatically writes surveys based on extensive literature research. And I think this is one that could be very interesting, right? Because maybe if we don't have access to API calls, or we are very limited API calls to find papers, maybe if we were able to find a survey paper, we could use that as a base to find other papers, right? Because then we kind of like a graph, right? Have the connections already, and you can see like, oh, let's read these other papers, right? But yeah, they mention here, like, yeah, it's kind of the synthesis of all these types of different works. They mention here LLM for structure exploration, right? Because LLMs contain many human level priors. They are commonly used as a tool. So they mention here like can be like to get like some ideas of how it can act as evaluators, judges, anything else, and all this type of thugs. And they do like the parallel with the LLM reviewers for papers. So like how we judge the ideas on novelty, interestingness, but also if like following a guideline of a conference, how we follow that. LLM for scientific discovery, I think again, they mention several other papers that do that, and you can see like only this paragraph graph will have more citations than the whole paper that the aiscientist generated, right? But I think one point that I think you go again, they mention here, like, oh, like this works, we are trying to find some that does all the steps using AI. So from ideation to writing to experiments. And I think they go again on the conclusions, but I think this one is a very interesting point that they mention here, that maybe with future advances with like robotic automation for labs, we could use this technology to run automated experiments, not only machine learning, something for coding, but something maybe on material science or anything like that. I get into the end of the paper, but limitations here, they mention some limitations of the automated reviewer, which maybe have like, we use a data set to calibrate, so maybe this data set is old. And I think here the more important one is does not have visual capabilities. And I think this one, like, how can you judge like if a plot is good or bad, or how easy it is to show the experiment, right? Maybe not to reject a paper, but maybe in the part of saying like, oh, you could improve this plot to, so the paper is clear, it has a clearer message or not. So I think this is a good point, and maybe now with the more advanced LLMs, this is no issue anymore. And then have like some failures, like I mentioned earlier, like we had like some experiments, some ideas, and then few ideas get to the point where we have a final paper. So they mention here, I think the one here is either fails to implement the ideas, a significant fraction of ideas. So had the idea, and then have start coding, and then at the end we never had a finished code or a code that does the correct experiment. And then other point that I think is very serious, that the AI scientist might incorrectly implement an idea. So we have to get how we catch that. So because sometimes you may read Latin and then it's the other, so issue. They mention here limitations on the usage of how much the LLM can iterate, so it doesn't have produced enough good results, but that's not a big deal. Yeah, and they mention here it does not have vision capabilities. It can't get like plots that maybe the code is good, but the plot is very bad, so it does not able to judge that. yeah, sometimes made critical errors when writing and evaluating results, like I mentioned earlier, like if it's not clear that a metric like less is better or bigger is better, sometimes you have like can write things like I mentioned, like error rates successfully increased by X% and continue the paper like this is like a positive, a plus of the paper. They mention here that sometimes the AI scientist can hallucinate entire results. I think this is more due to all the LLMs technologies as well. Uh, yeah, and then here they do like a final comment here that advise treating generated papers as hint of promising ideas to practitioners to follow up, right? Because maybe the technology still isn't there, or like they mention here, not mention this paper, but as you guys can see, they use very simple data sets, right? Because it's all like maybe toy data sets, so maybe this could apply even further to see if this holds for more common or data sets that make sense in the for a particular problem. Yeah, they also have like some issues. They had like to containerize the experiment because sometimes it would try to do things that are not optimal at all. So here they mention like an example that it was saving a checkpoint for every step. So it doesn't make any sense why to do that, and it would consume lots of storage. Yeah. So let's see what else here. They mention here like some ethical considerations about the ability of having a fully automated LLM. And they mention, I think they even mention here on the AI scientist generate first review, which was done by the AI scientist V2 about some ethical concerns about having an automated model, like if this should be upfront about that. And they also mention about the automated reviewer, which could uh, offset like the workload that is done by actual researchers reviewing papers in real conferences, and they are not paid for that. So I think that's a very fair point. But again, it could introduce some biases. So yeah, need like some transparency, but also I think some aspects is could be very interesting. Yeah, they mention also it could be deployed to explicitly deployed to conduct unethical research, which okay, I think it makes sense given that the repo is open. So yeah. Here on the discussion, they mention like white papers, writing papers. They do like why they think this is important. And then here is a point that I don't agree 100% that they mention here. Producing papers like around $15 per paper highlights its ability to democratize research and accelerate scientific progress. And I don't think that's necessary, right? Because it's cheaper for people to generate, but maybe larger institutions will be able to generate much more than smaller institutions, and even like the need for junior researchers, right? I think there's a point. I don't think necessarily being cheap here is like a big deal. Maybe it's could be, yeah, could be bad actually. But anyway. And again here, like the book of the cost of the AI scientist associated with LLM API calls and for paper writing, and then put some points here. And then for future directions, they mention here again, and I think this one is very interesting, right? Integrating these technologies with automation in physical labs. We could do not only research on a particular topic that relates to programming or computer science, right? But we could do experiments with the outside world, like biology, physics, yeah, maybe any other type of experiment, right? And then with automation, maybe we could, like, if something maybe is potentially harmful, right? We could use a full lab to do that, and then in AI to do that, everything. So I think this part is very interesting, right? But maybe it's more to do with the automation of robotics, which is a much more complex idea than the process that the AI scientist does, right? Which is just like, oh, idea, ideation, experiment, define experiment. I think is is the simpler part here, and then like conducting experiment maybe is more complicated, right? Have to deal with the real world. Anyway, so for the conclusion of the paper, here they mention that, for instance, like using the AI scientists, researchers often have more ideas than they have time to pursue. But so maybe using something similar to the AI scientists, we could like do like some first explorations, which I think is a very fair point, right? Very interesting, right? Don't need like maybe have like lots of ideas, and then like you want maybe a first batch of ideas or maybe a first draft of what could be done. I think this is a very interesting point. Anyway, I think the paper is it, but I would also like to add here this blog post that they had on March this year about the AI scientist generates its first peer-reviewed scientific publication. And they mention here that it was made using the AI Scientist V2, so it was more advanced version of the AI Scientist 1. And it generated, like, it submitted 3 papers to the ICLR 2025, and one of them was accepted, at least in the first part here. So let me see if I remember the parts that are, I think it's very interesting. So yeah, they put like 3 papers, and then they did experiment with the ICLR board. So they submitted papers, and then the peer review was not aware if a paper was generated by AI or not, but they mentioned like, oh, there's 3 papers here that are made from AI. Okay, so what else here? Yeah, so one of the papers was accepted for this conference. But for transparency, like they withdraw the paper after the peer review. So it was only like to make like, oh, to make their point, sakana.ai to make a point. I'll say, oh, it was approved, but since like maybe there's some ethical concerns that is important to be discussed before they like, oh, we withdrew the paper. So yeah, it did not perform any additional meta review. So it was approved, but maybe we could have a meta review that would reject the paper later, but it was withdrawn. So there's this point. Inoue, the first good enough. Yeah, and so they mention here that maybe it's the first fully AI generated paper that was good enough to pass a very prestigious scientific conference on machine learning, at least. And here, like they mention again, like some parts of the ethical conduct of code. So like maybe like in the future, right? How should we made aware of AI research? Should this be stated on the paper, like this paper was done with AI, or maybe partially with AI? So something that I think is valid. What else here? Oh, I think a point here that is very fair as well, that the aiscientist is a system that mostly that system based mostly of state-of-art language models, and thus the performance of the AI scientist is directly tied to the performance of these LLMs. If frontier foundation models keep getting better, as many scientists expect, then the AI scientists will also keep improving, right? Because I think there's a lot of, it's like it's a work of lots of agents and prompt engineering to generate what's possible with current technology. But I think is like, as the more important part is not refining the current code of the AI scientists, but the potential of newer models that are bigger and better, right? I think it's pretty clear. So I think other part that I think is funny, because they did the analysis on that the peer review based LLM that they presented on the AI Scientist V1. They did this, and they found like some very glaring mistakes here, like a wrong citation, like they cited Goodfellow when they had cited Schmidt-Huber, which I think is also funny, this part, but anyway. Yeah, and then they mention here somewhere here that all the 3 papers will not pass the bar. Yeah, I left a lot to Schmidt-Huber and Goodfellow, right? I a bit of going a bit off topic, but I would recommend like the field between Goodfellow and Schmidt-Huber. I think there's even a time that Schmidt-Huber like stopped like a presentation by Goodfellow and saying like, "Oh no, the work that you did actually is mine," etc. So yeah, I think like the mistake between these 2 guys makes it's very fine. But anyway, they reject the 3 papers, the automated peer review. So I think maybe they have a higher standard of quality, or I don't know, maybe they reject too much. But yeah, I think that's funny as well. So let's see here. Yeah, they mention here like the part of the future of the AI scientists, keep improving. As footnotes, I'm getting almost finished here. They mentioned that they had like other papers that were submitted to ICLR and that were accepted. So maybe this one is not the first publication to be accepted, but they mention here like, oh, actually it was not totally made by AI because the authors had to manually edit the citations and LaTeX formatting of the papers, which I think is like the least important part that I would be concerned about not being done by AI, right? I think I would be more concerned for like the code was done by human rather than an AI or the idea. Anyway, a bit nitpicking here from their side. But they also mentioned that I think it's a fair point here is that the track that this other work was submitted was a easier, a simpler track, and they tried to submit on the technical, the most technical track. So I think makes this work more maybe harder to be accepted than the other. Okay. Okay, I think that's it from my side. But I would like to finish here with another point, another conclusion that I mentioned. Like I think deep research is a thing that could help potentialize this work on finding potential references. I think I mentioned the part of the lab that you have like an automated lab in the real world and then conducting experiments using AI. I think this is also a very interesting potential idea. But here, I think the last point here that I think is the most important, not the most important, but to me, the most interesting way that I see technology nowadays to be applied, which is like someone suggested that the AI scientists should be adapted to automate reproducibility of existing papers. And I think this, not that it's more important, but I think would be a more interesting view, at least from my point of view, of doing uh, the of applying this type of technology, right? Because we have lots of papers that we don't have code for it, or maybe we believe on the results, but we don't have the code. So I think that would be very interesting to have a tool to build that, maybe automatically, or maybe you have like some shady results and you're not sure, right? So doing like a process that maybe don't have to rely on ideation and creativity, which is a thing that I think LLMs, they struggle a bit. I think they are very good. They're getting better and better, but they struggle a lot on that. And I think maybe the part of trying to do the work here would increase, like we have like a positive impact for others, right? Because maybe you have a paper that has like a very interesting model architecture, but was never released. And then if we're able to have a model that was able to release like a public repository of the code, that would potentialize much more potential projects, research projects, than like, oh, LLM can do like have some ideas and write a paper. I think, yeah, maybe that's my opinion, but I think that's it. Yeah, that's my presentation. So thanks everyone. Any comments? Let me just go here.
I think they nailed the main limitations of this, of using these LLMs to this level of production. I think that they hit the same glass ceiling that we all trying to produce it, because it's all about the discussion as well, being revealed, and so that's it. I think they are being very transparent to the limitations.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, this all said, is pretty exciting to be presenting seeing everything, this level of production with LLMs is very cool.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, I think it's really, really interesting, the work, right? I think it's, yeah, I don't know, like, if you think of this paper, like, thinking like 2023 or 2022, like, oh, you read this paper and they have the result, I wouldn't believe, right?
I don't know what you guys thought about it, but right in the beginning with that workflow, I I still think it's somehow generic yet. It's yet somehow generic. So, but it's a pioneer kind of article, so we can excuse that, right? I don't know if you know that or you share the same opinion, but I think is we will begin to see a lot of articles like that soon. So it's
Yes.
pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think that like all the tools. I think I would be interesting to know, like, not the AI scientist, but like current papers, like how many of them are already partially made using AI, right? Maybe like a cursor, right? Oh, you guy use cursor
Yeah,
to program, right? I think a lot of this type of work is already made using that, not because like, the research is not capable of doing, but like he's like, oh, need to automate some tasks. And I think they raise like these ethical concerns, like maybe like a fully automated or most all the experiment was done using LLMs, right? How should we flag that? Should we flag that or not? Right?
yeah, I think that's the point. Yeah, you nailed it. That's it.
Well, I think every time we talk about automation, not in, only in this particular place, but every time we talk about automation, we need to think whether this is something that is worth automating. Uh, Is it important to automate it, or is it important to be done by humans? Like
Mhm.
if someone create a robot that ate pizza, I would not stop eating pizza because the robot can do it for me. There are other activities that are good examples. I will not be diselegant here to mention, but like there are things that are very important for humans to keep because they're pleasurable, and the whole point is of the activity is it being done by a human.
Mhm.
Like, all right, now you automate research with a bot. So who is gaining from this? Is someone getting smarter because the bot published the paper? Like, doing research is not just for the sake of publishing in a conference. It's for the sake of you learning whatever the hell is that you wrote in the paper, right? So I think we need to be careful, take these things with a grain of salt, and think about not only uh, the goal of having a paper published, but also the goal of going through the process, the thought process, the investigation process of coming up with something that is worth being published in the first place. Yeah, that's my rant.
Yeah, no, I think I agree 100%. And I think another point is that, like, oh, imagine now world that you have like lots of said AI scientists, and then like have like lots of great results, but we don't have an author. So, like, okay, it would be published, but I don't know, like, how easily would that be made for other scientists, right? Because have like the presentation part, and I think all the work that a scientist does when it goes to present other works, like it brings a bit of that, right? And then like the work, since it's generated by an agentic framework, it was like the work is the work, right? It doesn't have like, maybe it doesn't hold like this like, building from past experiments, right? I think is a point that yeah, and I agree with you. I think is a point like like I mentioned here. Like I think the most important part would be like automating like past works and automating and getting like able to reproduce and made publicly available some experiments, right? Because this could potentialize other researchers doing that, right? Doing cool stuff, right? But yeah, I agree with you. Daniel?
And regarding that diagram that you showed in the beginning of the paper, the view one AI scientist, on the first step when the AI is like brainstorming, yeah. Do you know if the AI like those ideas are coming from like it's pre-training alone, or if it's actually having access to other papers and doing some sort of literature review in this step?
Yeah, so they generate some ideas and then they do like the novelty check using the Semantic Scholar API. So they use, at least they mention here that they use more for filtering and say like, oh, this is novel or not. So if it's novel, they keep. If it's novel, they keep. If it's not, maybe they say like, oh, it's not novel, so maybe they keep this for future iterations, but they like say, oh, but we want to continue this idea. So it's kind of like that. So, but
But
also how they find the paper as well using the API, it's not clear to me as well.
But the idea itself comes from like the pre-training of the LLM, right?
Yeah, from the LLM, yes, the LLM. So you mentioned like, oh, you are a researcher, blah 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 in machine learning, and then you have like a seed idea that like, oh, training convolutional neural networks to do X, and
But
then it generates different ideas.
yeah, because that feels to me like a huge limitation, right? If you compare to how we do it and usually how we have
Yes,
insights, like we actually have to expose ourselves to others' ideas, and
good point.
it's a weird, very weird. And then it matches to what you caught earlier about you having to get like just a few references later when it's doing latex. It's like after the fact, the matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah, I think it's there's this point that is weird, but I think also just to add here that also that's this part of the creativity, right? Because maybe it's a bit limited on like different ideas. I think if you go to Claude and have like some ideas, say, oh, generate idea on that, it will generate lots of ideas. Maybe some of them don't make sense or not. So I don't know how productive the ideas that they have, how much they have to iterate to get better and better and better, right? But I think it's a good point. Like maybe an idea out of nowhere won't appear. It will be like just a bit, like a few. You change a bit of the current landscape, but will not be like that maverick idea, right? But yeah, Lua.
yeah, great presentation. Thank you for that. I do have a kind of a detailed kind of question in if they have any mechanism to do citations, right? I think you said that the references were shallow and that it did get a citation wrong. But I'm wondering that if they have any type of mechanism where they store the paper so that they don't need to have the context in their context window all the time, and that they can reference it in the final paper. Because I think this is kind of a hardish problem where you write a phrase, right? You reference something. Not sure if they said something in the paper or not about that.
Yeah, they mostly mention about getting using API to get the reference of the paper, but they don't mention too much on that. And at least for this one, they use the V2, which I don't know how much it changed, right? They changed some aspects here. They mention here that they don't need like that much detailed context here to generate ideas, but I don't know how better it is. But yeah, I think it's a fair point, right? Because maybe it would make sense to get the papers and keep them as part of the brain, right? A context, right? Even like don't need to do like reg or stuff like that, but I think like, oh, this context here, you get applied ideas from this paper here. You use mostly this part, specific part, but you have all the whole context that maybe we could derive like some insights from that, right? But yeah, good point as well.
Does it, so on the paper that you showed that it produced, does it have citations, like a lot of citations, or
No,
are
it
there
doesn't
plots?
have here. Or let me show here. It has like it has here like
It has
one, two.
references, but not no. So yeah, it does have references, but what I'm
Citations.
meaning
Yeah,
is
yeah,
like
yes.
is on the
It's
phrase and
using
then you.
LaTeX. Can I do the thing here? Let's see. Oh, yeah. Good. Let's see. Good fellow is 2 times. Only. Yeah, that's a good point, right? Jonas Pfeiffer. Jonas. No, no, maybe it's only Pfeiffer. But yeah, Vaswani. Let's. Yeah, it's style only 1 time. So at least these two papers, right? I don't know about the others. And most of them are on the background. So yeah. Yeah, apparently they don't cite too much. Like they cite 1 time.
It looks like they kind of get the paper. They have like a small description of it,
Yes,
so that it kind of what the paper is supposed to be, but they
yes,
don't do the like during the generation like okay, so this is the idea proposed by this. So,
Yes.
this is a very hard problem, right?
Hmm.
But interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's it. And yeah, I think again, like going back to the point of Fabio, I think it is a thing that I think about the apocalyptic view of AI and the technology, right? Like doing stuff that not only stuff that improve our lives, but like things that maybe we actually want to do and it's not automating, right? So what's the point? And maybe like to get like some increased productivity metrics for some researchers that are already established. So like yeah, it makes the entry level even higher, like the bar. But anyway, I think that's it. Let me stop the recording. So thanks everyone.